Welcome to our channel Reddit Cheating Stories. James stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his uniform for what felt like the 100th time. He was a man of precision, and every detail mattered. His wife, Emily, came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You look perfect," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. James turned to face her, taking in the sight of her beautiful smile and sparkling eyes. They had been married for 5 years, and every day with her felt like a gift. "I'm going to miss you so much," Emily said, her voice trembling. James pulled her close, holding her tightly. "I'll be back before you know it," he promised. "And I'll be counting down the days until I can hold you in my arms again." The sound of the doorbell broke the moment, and James knew it was time to leave. He took one last look at Emily, memorizing every detail of her face, and then turned to head out the door. The deployment was supposed to last 6 months, but James knew it could be extended. He was a seasoned soldier, and he had been on countless missions before. But this time felt different. This time, he had Emily to come home to. As he boarded the plane, James felt a mix of emotions. He was proud to serve his country, but he was also scared of what could happen. He pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. The flight was long and grueling, but James didn't sleep. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When they finally arrived at their destination, James was relieved to be on solid ground. He took a deep breath, feeling the hot desert air fill his lungs. This was it. This was where he would spend the next 6 months. James' thoughts turned to Emily, and he wondered what she was doing at that moment. Was she thinking of him? Was she missing him as much as he was missing her? He pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. He had a job to do, and he was determined to do it well. But as the days turned into weeks, James couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He was thousands of miles away from Emily, and he had no way of knowing what was going on back home. And then, the messages started to change. At first, it was just a delay in Emily's responses. James would send her a message, and it would take her a few hours to respond. But as the weeks went by, the delays got longer and longer. James tried to brush it off, telling himself that Emily was just busy. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. And then, the excuses started. Emily would tell James that she was tired, or that she was busy with work. But James knew her schedule, and he knew she wasn't working that much. Something was going on, and James was determined to find out what it was. But for now, he was stuck in the desert, thousands of miles away from the woman he loved. And all he could do was wait. James tried to push the doubts out of his mind, focusing on his work instead. He threw himself into his duties, taking on extra tasks and responsibilities. But no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One day, while on patrol, James' team came under fire. They took cover behind a nearby wall, returning fire as best they could. James was pinned down, unable to move without exposing himself to enemy fire. As he waited for backup to arrive, James' mind began to wander. He thought about Emily, and the doubts that had been plaguing him. He wondered if she was okay, if she was thinking of him. And then, a strange thought occurred to him. What if Emily was in trouble? What if she needed his help? James pushed the thought aside, telling himself he was being paranoid. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would continue to grow until he got to the bottom of things. When they finally returned to base, James immediately went to the communication tent to send Emily a message. He waited anxiously for her response, but it didn't come. Not that day, not the next. James' suspicions grew with each passing day. He tried to reach Emily through other means, but she seemed to have disappeared. And then, just when James thought things couldn't get any worse, he received a message from an unknown number. "Your wife is not who you think she is." James' heart skipped a beat as he read the message. Who was this person, and what did they mean? He tried to respond, but the number was no longer in service. James was left with more questions than answers. What was going on with Emily? And who was behind the mysterious message? He knew one thing for sure, he had to get to the bottom of things. James couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept wandering back to Emily and the mysterious message. He knew he had to do something, but he didn't know where to start. He couldn't just leave his post and go back to the States. He had a job to do, and he couldn't abandon his team. But he couldn't just sit back and do nothing either. James decided to start by asking around. He talked to the other guys in his unit, asking if they had heard anything about Emily or the mysterious message. No one seemed to know anything, but James didn't give up. He kept asking questions, kept digging until he finally got a lead. One of the guys in his unit had a cousin who lived in the same town as Emily. James asked him to reach out to his cousin to see if she had heard anything about Emily. It wasn't much, but it was a start. James waited anxiously for news, his mind racing with possibilities. What was Emily involved in? And who was behind the mysterious message? He didn't have to wait long for answers. The next day, James received a message from his friend's cousin. She had some information about Emily, and she was willing to share it with James. But she wanted to talk to him in person. James' heart skipped a beat as he read the message. What had Emily done? And what did this woman know? He knew one thing for sure, he had to get to the bottom of things. James' mind was racing as he waited for his friend's cousin to arrive. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew it couldn't be good. When she finally arrived, James was struck by her nervous demeanor. She fidgeted with her hands, avoiding eye contact. What is it? James asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. What do you know about Emily? The woman took a deep breath before speaking. I'm so sorry, James. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but Emily is seeing someone else. James felt like he had been punched in the gut. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Who? He managed to croak. The woman hesitated before answering. His name is Rick. I don't know much about him, but I've seen them together. They're close. James' mind was reeling. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Emily, his wife, the woman he loved, was cheating on him. He felt a wave of anger wash over him, followed by a deep sadness. He thought about all the times Emily had told him she loved him, all the times she had promised to be faithful. It was all a lie. James didn't know what to do, didn't know how to process this information. He felt like his whole world had been turned upside down. But as he sat there, trying to make sense of it all, he knew one thing for sure, he was going to confront Emily. James' heart was racing as he boarded the plane to head back to the States. He couldn't wait to confront Emily, to demand answers. As he arrived at their home, James felt a sense of unease. Something didn't feel right. He entered the house, calling out for Emily. There was no response. James' instincts told him to search the house, to see if he could find any evidence of Emily's infidelity. And then, he saw them. Emily and Rick were sitting on the couch, holding hands. They looked up at James, startled. James! Emily exclaimed, trying to sound innocent. I can explain. James didn't let her finish. Explain, he repeated, his voice cold. You're going to explain why you're cheating on me? Emily looked guilty, but Rick just smirked. You're not even here, he sneered. What did you expect? James felt a wave of anger wash over him, but he kept his cool. I expected my wife to be faithful, he said, his voice dripping with venom. But I guess that was too much to ask. Emily started crying, begging James for forgiveness. But James wasn't having it. It's over, he said, his voice firm. Our marriage is over. And with that, James walked out of the house, leaving Emily and Rick behind. James walked out of the house, feeling a mix of emotions. He was angry, hurt, and betrayed. He couldn't believe that Emily, the woman he loved and trusted, had cheated on him. As he walked, James didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get away from the house, away from Emily and Rick. He eventually found himself at a nearby park, sitting on a bench. He sat there for hours, trying to process what had just happened. James thought about all the memories he and Emily had made together. He thought about their wedding day, their honeymoon, and all the special moments they had shared. But now, all of those memories were tainted. James couldn't help but wonder if Emily had been cheating on him the entire time they were married. The thought made him sick to his stomach. As the sun began to set, James realized he needed to find a place to stay. He couldn't go back to the house, not now. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It was his old friend, Michael. "Hey, man," Michael answered. "What's up?" James took a deep breath before explaining the situation. Michael listened, shocked and outraged. "Dude, I'm so sorry," Michael said. "You can stay with me tonight. We'll figure out what to do tomorrow." James thanked Michael and made his way to his friend's house. As he lay in bed that night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Emily and Rick, wondering what they were doing. He eventually drifted off to sleep, but his mind was still racing. The next few weeks were a blur for James. He stayed with Michael, trying to come to terms with what had happened. He eventually found a lawyer and started the divorce process. It wasn't easy, but James knew it was necessary. Emily didn't contest the divorce, which surprised James. He thought she would put up a fight, try to win him back. But she didn't. As the divorce proceedings continued, James started to feel a sense of closure. He realized that he deserved better than someone who would cheat on him. He started to focus on himself, on his own healing. He started going to the gym, running, and eating healthy. James also started to reconnect with old friends, people he had lost touch with during his marriage. He started to feel like himself again, like the man he was before Emily. And as he looked in the mirror one day, James saw a glimmer of hope. He saw a future without Emily, a future where he was happy and fulfilled. The divorce was finalized, and James felt a sense of relief wash over him. He was finally free from the toxic relationship that had consumed his life. He decided to start fresh, to leave the past behind and focus on the future. James started by moving to a new apartment, one that was closer to his work and had a great view of the city. He spent his days working on his security consulting business, and his nights exploring the city, trying new restaurants and meeting new people. James also started to reconnect with his family, who had been supportive throughout the divorce process. His parents were thrilled to see him happy again, and his siblings were eager to introduce him to their friends. As James settled into his new life, he started to feel like himself again. He was confident, outgoing, and carefree. One night, while out with friends at a bar, James met a woman named Sophia. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had a quick wit that caught James off guard. They talked for hours, laughing and joking like they had known each other for years. James was smitten, and he knew he wanted to see her again. As the night drew to a close, James walked Sophia home, feeling a sense of excitement and possibility. "Would you like to go out again sometime?" James asked, feeling a little nervous. Sophia smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I'd love to," she said. James grinned, feeling a sense of joy he hadn't felt in years. James and Sophia went on several dates, getting to know each other better with each passing day. James was smitten, and he knew he wanted to spend more time with her. As they sat on the beach, watching the sunset, James realized that he had finally found someone special. Sophia was kind, caring, and had a beautiful soul. James knew he had to tell Sophia about his past, about Emily and the divorce. He was nervous, but he knew it was necessary. Sophia listened, her eyes filled with compassion and understanding. When James finished, she took his hand, her touch warm and comforting. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Sophia said. "But I'm glad you're here now, with me." James smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude and love. He knew he had found someone special, someone who cared about him for who he was. As the days turned into weeks, James and Sophia's relationship continued to blossom. They spent every spare moment together, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and just enjoying each other's company. James had never felt this way about anyone before. He was deeply in love with Sophia, and he knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. Sophia felt the same way. She had been hurt in past relationships, but James was different. He was kind, caring, and genuinely loved her for who she was. One night, as they sat on the beach watching the stars, James turned to Sophia and took her hand. "I love you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Sophia's eyes welled up with tears. "I love you too," she replied. James smiled, feeling a sense of joy and contentment. He knew that he had found his soulmate in Sophia. As the months passed, James and Sophia's relationship continued to grow stronger. They traveled the world together, built a home, and started a life. James knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Sophia. He wanted to marry her, to make her his wife. One day, James took Sophia to the same beach where they had first said, "I love you." He got down on one knee, pulled out a small box, and asked Sophia to marry him. Sophia was overwhelmed with emotion. She said yes, and James placed the ring on her finger. They hugged, kissed, and cried tears of joy. James knew that this was just the beginning of their life together. The wedding was a beautiful, sunny day. James and Sophia exchanged vows in front of their friends and family. James promised to love and cherish Sophia, to stand by her side through thick and thin. Sophia promised to love and support James, to be his partner and best friend. As they exchanged rings, James felt a sense of completeness. He knew that he had found his soulmate in Sophia. The reception was a lively, joyous celebration. James and Sophia danced, laughed, and enjoyed every moment of their special day. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, James looked into Sophia's eyes and knew that he would love her forever. James and Sophia spent their honeymoon traveling through Europe, visiting famous landmarks and enjoying each other's company. They strolled through the streets of Paris, holding hands and admiring the beauty of the city. They visited the Colosseum in Rome, marveling at the ancient history. They even took a gondola ride through the canals of Venice, feeling like they were in a romantic dream. Throughout their trip, James and Sophia couldn't stop smiling. They were happy, carefree, and deeply in love. One night, as they sat on a moonlit beach in Greece, James turned to Sophia and said, "I'm so grateful to have you in my life. You're my soulmate, my best friend, and my everything." Sophia's eyes sparkled with tears. "I feel the same way about you, James," she replied. "I love you more and more each day." James smiled, feeling his heart overflow with love. "I love you too, Sophia," he said. "Forever and always." After their honeymoon, James and Sophia returned home, eager to start their new life together. They settled into a beautiful house in the suburbs, surrounded by trees and a lovely garden. James continued to work on his security consulting business, while Sophia pursued her passion for photography. Together, they built a happy and fulfilling life. They traveled, explored new hobbies, and enjoyed each other's company. James' friends and family were overjoyed to see him so happy. They welcomed Sophia with open arms, and the two became inseparable. As the years passed, James and Sophia grew even closer. They faced challenges and overcome obstacles, but their love remained strong. One day, James turned to Sophia and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find happiness again after Emily. But then I met you, and everything changed." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with love. "I know exactly what you mean, James," she replied. "I was hurt before, but you healed me. You showed me what true love is." James' heart swelled with emotion. "I love you, Sophia," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I love you too, James," Sophia replied. "Forever and always." Years had passed since James and Sophia's wedding day. They had built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and adventure. One day, as James sat on the porch, watching the sunset, he couldn't help but reflect on his journey. He thought about his time in the military, his marriage to Emily, and the pain of their divorce. But most of all, he thought about Sophia. He thought about the way she made him laugh, the way she always knew how to make him feel better, and the way she loved him with all her heart. James realized that he had been given a second chance at love, and he was grateful for every moment he had with Sophia. He got up from the porch and walked inside, where Sophia was busy cooking dinner. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close. "I love you," he whispered in her ear. Sophia turned around and smiled. "I love you too," she replied. James looked into her eyes, feeling a deep connection. "You know, I never thought I'd find happiness again after Emily," he said. "But then I met you, and everything changed." Sophia's eyes sparkled with tears. "I know exactly what you mean, James," she said. "I was hurt before, but you healed me. You showed me what true love is." James' heart swelled with emotion. He knew that he had found his soulmate in Sophia, and he was grateful for every moment they spent together. As James and Sophia looked to the future, They knew that they would face challenges and obstacles along the way. But they also knew that they would face them together, as a team. They talked about starting a family, about traveling the world, and about growing old together. James knew that he had found his partner, his best friend, and his soulmate in Sophia. He knew that their love would last a lifetime. As they sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle to life, James turned to Sophia and smiled. "I'm so excited to see what the future holds for us," he said. Sophia smiled back, her eyes shining with love. "Me too," she replied. "I know that as long as we have each other, we can face anything." James nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection and love. He knew that their bond would only grow stronger with time. And as they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, James knew that he had finally found his happily ever after. Years passed, and James and Sophia's love continued to grow. They traveled the world, built a successful business, and started a family. Their first child, a baby boy named Jack, was born on a sunny summer day. James was overjoyed, holding his son in his arms for the first time. Sophia smiled, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We created a beautiful life together." James nodded, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. "We sure did," he replied. As Jack grew up, James and Sophia were amazed by his curiosity, his energy, and his kind heart. They knew they had created a special child, one who would make a difference in the world. A few years later, Sophia gave birth to a baby girl named Lily. She was a sweet, gentle soul, with a smile that could light up a room. James was besotted with his daughter, spending hours playing with her, reading her stories, and singing her lullabies. As their children grew, James and Sophia knew they had to balance their love for each other with their love for their family. But they were determined to make it work, to create a happy, harmonious home. And as they sat down to dinner together, James knew that he had found his true purpose in life, to love and protect his family, to provide for them, and to be their rock in times of need. As the years went by, James and Sophia's children grew into confident, compassionate, and successful adults. Jack became a doctor, dedicating his life to helping others. Lily became a teacher, inspiring young minds and shaping the future. James and Sophia couldn't be prouder of their children, knowing that they had passed on their values of love, kindness, and hard work. One day, as James sat on the porch, watching his grandchildren play in the yard, he turned to Sophia and smiled. "We did it," he said. "We created a legacy of love." Sophia nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "We sure did," she replied. James looked out at the beautiful life they had built together, feeling a sense of gratitude and contentment. He knew that their love story would continue to unfold, that their family would continue to grow and thrive. And as the sun set on another day, James knew that he had found his happily ever after, surrounded by the people he loved most in the world. As James and Sophia grew older, they continued to enjoy each other's company. They traveled, spent time with their family, and pursued their hobbies. James took up painting, and Sophia started writing poetry. They would spend hours together, creating art and sharing their thoughts and feelings. Their love for each other only deepened with time. They would sit on the porch, holding hands, and watch the sunset. One day, as they sat on the porch, James turned to Sophia and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find happiness again after Emily. But then I met you, and everything changed." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "I know exactly what you mean, James," she said. "I was hurt before, but you healed me. You showed me what true love is." James nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection and love. "We've had an amazing life together, Sophia," he said. "I'm so grateful for every moment we've shared." Sophia squeezed his hand. "Me too, James," she replied. "Me too." As the years went by, James and Sophia's health began to decline. They were both in their 80s, and their bodies were no longer as strong as they once were. But their love for each other never wavered. They continued to care for each other, to support each other, and to cherish every moment they had together. One day, as James lay in bed, Sophia by his side, he turned to her and said, "You know, I've been thinking. I want to go back to the beach where we first met." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "That's a wonderful idea, James," she said. And so, with the help of their family, James and Sophia made one final trip to the beach. They sat on the sand, holding hands, and watched the sunset. As the sun dipped below the horizon, James turned to Sophia and said, "I love you." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "I love you too, James," she replied. And with that, James closed his eyes, surrounded by the love of his life, and passed away peacefully. Sophia held him close, tears streaming down her face. She knew that she would soon follow him, but for now, she was at peace. For she knew that their love would live on, forever and always. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping tales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.